Half a day. This is Tori Manley speaking on Fanachu. This episode is the second goal, zero hunger. Now, let us all together, as we listen to this, take a collective inhale. Ooh, hopefully no one don't do. And exhale. I want to ask you a personal question. What is your intention for listening to today's episode? Yeah, ask those questions. Let it be what it be. So right now in our timeline of 2025, we are in our transition period from decolonization and demilitarization. So we have the Sustainable Development Targets to think about, the values and principles that could be associated with each actionable item that we would like to embody, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I would like to talk about it so often when we get here. So, may we always have abundance. I can recall a few legends for the Chamorro people where we have been able to thrive on key staples in the Mariana Islands, and we have a story to really showcase how important each of these food sources are. And we've had an abundance, not only an abundance, but a diversity. The diversity of our food intake is so valuable and important. It can also be a reflection or kind of like a mirror image of our food that we're eating today. So in today's world, we have, instead of having local farmers, we have local farmers, but they're not the main source of our food supply. We, of course, had many skilled labor force, much of a skilled labor force or family or clan that was able to survive in small group systems or clans or communities. But now, in reflection with our colonization, there is a shift in where we get our food and what kind of food we're eating. And this affects our and these are policies that affect our everyday lives, among other things. What I'm really trying to get at is that we must decentralize the food supply. How can we prepare for decolonization? I'll give my spill, and then I want to introduce Rory Respicio, Port Authority General Manager. We're going to talk about the Jones Act. We're going to talk a little bit about their work culture and some policies in place that really hinder our food supply. No hunger by 2030. Let that ring in your ears for a second. That's literally 5 years from now. Correct and prevent trade restrictions and distortions in world agricultural markets, including through parallel elimination of all forms of agricultural export subsidies and all export measures with equivalent effect, in accordance with the mandate of the Doha Development Round. It is a series of trade negotiations that started in 2001 by an organization called World Trade Organization, and they are supposed to help each other to make global trade rules fairer for developing countries. Continuing, so they focus on reducing agricultural subsidies. They help with improving market access and addressing trade and barriers. Despite its goal, the talks have largely stalled due to disagreements between wealthy and developing nations over issues like farm subsidies and industrial tariffs. So that whole statement was from the World Trade Organization. And here's a partial quote from Article 25. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, ... end quote. Or the lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25. The Earth Charter advocates for an equitable, just, and sustainable world. So now let's go into this cute little story. So imagine this girl. Her name is Fanihi. Fanihi is a child that goes to middle school in your village. She relies on school for breakfast and lunch. When it's time for her to get on the bus and go home, Fanihi and her family, when she arrives home, go occasionally to different gatherings, social gatherings, fiestas. They go to house parties, and they get to eat a little extra. The community is supplementing their food just like the school. Fanihi and her family rely on community kindness and generosity. Does Fanihi deserve to eat? That question, if Fanihi deserves to eat, is a Western lens question where protection from hunger is not a human dignity, but food is something that you have to earn. So with that framework, hunger is seen as a personal failure, not a societal one. If we are ready to be integrated with the international community as a developing nation, we must agree as people that everyone deserves to eat and everyone deserves to be protected from hunger. So let's reflect on this question. Have you ever been in Fanihi's shoes where you didn't eat at school or you didn't have enough to eat? Do you ever remember thinking in class like, I'm so hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I cannot think. My tummy. When you are hungry, it is impossible to learn anything. And when you're hungry, your body does not feel safe. When we cannot think beyond hunger, it becomes unsustainable for anyone to be hungry. So hunger is a barrier to education, health, and peace. Here are statistics that show the effects of unsustainable food systems. According to 49.9% of surveyed Guam households, so that is 273 people that participated. They reported being food insecure in the year 2023. At least 1 in 2 families struggle to afford to eat nutritious food. Alongside our food insecurity as just individual households, 89 to 90% of what we eat comes into the island. It's imported. And retail food that we buy is 40% higher than the price in the United States mainland. So according to KUAM, this is a violent system of food insecurity, one that leaves us almost completely reliant to the United States. Now let's go check another source that's so credible. According to the USDA, in 2023, there were around 6,000 people in need of special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. This is broken down, if you want those, extra little demographics, that is a collection of 358 pregnant women, 497 breastfeeding women, 307 postpartum women, 1,290 infants, and 3,587 children. According to the Citizen Portal, the nonprofit Guam Sustainable Culture has redirected or grown 50,000 pounds of surplus produce since 2020. Okay, I have one more number comment, and I swear we're done with statistics. I just felt like all of them were really important. In the year 2021, 39,000 residents enrolled in SNAP or food stamps, and that is at least a quarter of the population. So, to reflect on our first episode of the Sustainable Development Goals, Zero Poverty, I mentioned a person named Levin Camacho. He is the former Attorney General, and he said Guam's economy has never been low enough where we wouldn't be useful to the United States. And our economy has never been too high where we could start craving or asking for more. That more could look like education, the ability to afford stuff. So to connect that correlation with Levin Camacho, our highest GDP and our lowest GDP within 10 years has only had a $1,645 million difference. Or in a simpler term, it's only rised by 31% between our highest and lowest GDP. And what Levin Camacho said correlates with the 10-year time span that I sampled for that number. Is Principle 16, Nonviolence and Peace. Let us promote the active participation, everyone gets to decide, of all people without discrimination in decision making. I'll repeat that. Nonviolence and peace. Promote the active participation of all without discrimination in decision making. Equitable human development. Ensure that economic activities promote human development in an equitable and sustainable manner. As people, we are going to move away from exploitation, and we are going to invite food systems that empower and nourish our communities. That could look like co-ops, farming together, gardening together, bartering, trading. I'm into it. It kind of sounds like something a prepper would do, kind of. Sustainable lifestyles. We correctly manage the use of renewable resources such as food, water, and forest products in ways that do not exceed rates of regeneration. As a people, we advocate and encourage sustainable food systems and equitable access for all peoples. And now I invite you to listen to
Rory Respicio, General Manager, Port Authority, Guam. Buenas.
Buenas.
Fanachu.
Yes.
Tori, thank you for the opportunity to talk about what we love to talk about the most is the port.
Yeah.
I look forward to this conversation because, as you explained why you're doing this, we want an opportunity to talk about the port. And as you know, 90% of the goods coming into the island come to the port. And this topic of the Jones Act is kind of controversial. So the port's role is just to receive vessels and discharge vessels. Make sure that vessels comply with those requirements such as the Jones Act and other regulatory requirements required by the Coast Guard. So we're heavily regulated by the Coast Guard. From the waterfront out is the Coast Guard, and then inland we have our local laws. And so governor, right? And it's the rule of law, and it's our policies, it's our board. I would think that if the Jones Act were repealed, it would just mean that shipping lines would be able to come to Guam that would not have to be U.S. flagship.
Okay.
So it just opens up more ships and more routes. U.S. law that requires ships that requires that all goods shipped between the U.S. ports be transported on vessels that are built in the United States, owned by U.S. citizens, registered under the U.S. flag, manned primarily by U.S. crews, and the Jones Act requires that shipping between U.S. ports use American-built flagged and crewed vessels. Guam is technically exempt from parts of the law, as you know, but in practice, we are still affected because most cargo routes go through U.S. ports like Honolulu or the West Coast, and this limits competition and raises costs for everyone doing business here. So those who've been trying to have the repeal of the Jones Act argue that having fair competition would increase more shipping lines and would lower the prices. As we see in the paper today, Senator Jesse Lujan, who's our legislative oversight chair, he's continuing the push to have this kind of repeal to the Jones Act, so we can have that kind of experience. It's protecting U.S. jobs. These are ships that have to be built in the United States, and so the reason why the argument as to why it's been difficult to repeal the Jones Act is because it's tied to jobs that are unionized. And it's why it's very difficult to get Congress to repeal this, because when you talk about the building ships in the U.S., these are tied to U.S. jobs, and these ships have to be registered under the U.S. flag, and so it's buy American, build American, and and so and then these and it has to be owned by U.S. citizens. So then, so then the cost of these ships built in the United States versus a ship built in Asia, then there's also cost considerations, and then what does that translate to the cost of goods? Because everything is all factored in. And when we see more shipping options, we potentially see lower costs, especially from nearby countries in Asia. And if we could open the door to new trade relationships, but that shift would have to be managed carefully to balance national security, labor standards, and long-term economic stability. So there's more to just repealing the Jones Act. And there's two sides to the issue. And if you're a proponent of the Jones Act, you'll say we need the Jones Act because it requires that it provides that those that are Jones Act carrier means that the ships get to come on regular schedule. Uh, for those that are not Jones Act carrier, they come in when they come in. Sometimes we're seeing ships coming from Asia that are not Jones Act compliant. This administration is more about commerce and national defense, which is also good for the port, because for the last several years, we've repositioned the Port of Guam to have a dual purpose, not only commerce, but also to support national defense and national security. There are things that the Port of Guam can do to support military readiness, and DoD has to pay. And I know that that's going to be music to your ears because mitigation is important. Just like, for example, our gantry cranes. We have 3 gantry cranes that are 42 years old. They were purchased used from the Port of Los Angeles, I think, in 2009. And one is set to be decommissioned in 2028, other one in 2030, and then the other one in 2032. Every day there's a hardship. Every year. Yeah. Well, but then they're very well maintained by the equipment maintenance guys, and every year they're recertified by OSHA. But then there's also, but also, Department of Defense recognizes that if one crane goes down, it's going to set back the whole military readiness program by about 4 years.
Okay. And then
And
when is the military readiness program supposed to be?
well, what's ongoing, right? So you saw in the paper over the next several years, they're poised to spend about $5 billion in construction. This is why they're also eyeing how the port has to stay operational, not only for the civilian community, but also for the Department of Defense. Placed, there's a hold Area A field storage facility. We need to have that rehabilitated for fuel for the island, for the region, for the DoD. I know some people, this whole anti-military sentiment, and that's respect to be respected. But sometimes we have to find a common ground and a way to coexist, right? And the way to coexist is we have to have shared facilities, but this partnership means that both entities have to pay their fair share. And so when we look at federal policy, we look at how do we have that win? And I think we're winning in a sense that most recently Congressman Moylan introduced a earmark in this big beautiful bill. Even though it passed, we're still waiting for the final outcome. He put in a $60 million earmark for the three gantry cranes, and there's still a local match from the port that we have to put in for the full replacement of the three gantry cranes. And then if that doesn't materialize, MARAD, who's our counterpart, they're they they also have a grant. They might make a decision sometime in January, and so we're tracking these things. There's and then along with we understand our obligation to the community, so we're doing clean ports, we're doing sustainability, and so gone are the days where we're just discharging vessels. We're also tracking the decarbonization, the environment, and and being more responsible. This administration is more about commerce and national defense, which is also good for the port because for the last several years we've repositioned the port of Guam to have a dual purpose, not only commerce but also to support national defense and national security. I know that's kind of going to trigger you and your listeners early when it comes to federal policy. We're closer to Manila, but we're treated like we're closer to Hawaii and California. And so, we're an unincorporated territory. This is why our status is, are we U.S. or are we not U.S.? And so here at the port, the position we've taken is we're tip of the spear. And I mean, that's probably a most overused phrase, but I think it's a phrase that we've capitalized on. And so in the last several years, in our master plan, 2023 master plan, and the board recently said we're going to change that to 2025 master plan, so we've updated it. We've repositioned the port so we could tell the Department of Defense that if the port's not ready, the military's not going to be ready. And this doesn't mean that as a civilian community, as a commercial port, a civilian port, we just roll over and say, hey, Department of Defense, whatever you want from us, you can have it. No, we're saying you pay your fair share. We're saying the port is critical to national defense and defense of our nation. There's three gantry cranes that need to be replaced, and this is the price tag. We need your help. There's a H wharf that could be a multi-use wharf. We need your help. There's two fuel piers that need to be replaced. There's a whole area. There are things that the Port of Guam can do to support military readiness, and DoD has to pay. And I know that that's going to be music to your ears because mitigation is important. Just like, for example, our gantry cranes. We have three gantry cranes that are 42 years old. They were purchased used from the Port of Los Angeles, I think, in 2009. And one is set to be decommissioned in 2028, other one in 2030, and then the other one in 2032. Every day there's a hardship. Every year. Yeah. Well, but then they're very well maintained by the equipment maintenance guys, and every year they're recertified by OSHA. But then there's also but also Department of Defense recognizes that if one crane goes down, it's going to set back the whole military readiness program by about 4 years. I was in the legislature for about 14 years. This was always a hot topic. And I also had oversight over federal foreign affairs. There was and Representative Ed Case from Honolulu, he's still there. Because Hawaii is also asking, I believe, for a Jones Act exemption. CNMI, believe it or not, has a Jones Act exemption. Guam has, like I said, limited Jones Act exemption. But then but because CNMI is Jones Act exemption, they're not a port set up to, they're not a deep draft water port, and they don't have SDS gantry cranes. So it would take a lot of investment in that port to dredge, to have gantry cranes, and to have containers go directly from Asia to CNMI, and then have a feeder vessel to the Guam port. Unlike the port of Guam, where all the goods come into 90% of the goods come to the port of Guam, but most of the transshipment goods come through the port. Then they're put on smaller boats, vessels, and they're transshipped to like CNMI and then to the other islands. Global brands dominate the market. Social media. I mean, on TikTok, there's this ice cream thing. I don't know if you, yeah, there's this thing with different flavors, mango, peach, and lemon, and there's now it's causing people to flock to uh, Donkey and Payless, and then whatever you see on social media, on Facebook, people want to run to it, and people try it, and oh, it's not quite the hype, right? So you see something, you want to get it, and so we're all victims of that, right? And so those global brands really dominate the market, and it's really from the port's perspective. I tell you, all we see are containers. All we see are, and then we have what we call break bulk items. Anything that can't fit in a container is called a break bulk. Then we see vehicles. Uh, the agency that could tell you what's inside a container is Customs and Quarantine, because they have the manifest, and they have a bill of lading, and everything is itemized. And we're also very proud of Customs. They've come a very long way. They're going to stand up their SCUDA system, where they can you can they're going to start to itemize, like, to the detail, like how many cans of soda by brand is going to come into the island, um, things like that, right? And so I had a law in the legislature some time ago to track, like, how many bananas are imported, how many like to the vegetable, and so all of those things were done manually through the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. And so if we start tracking, like, what it demands for fruits and vegetables, for example, that come in, then they share that data with the local farmers, and then the local farmers hopefully can see what kind of the demand is, and maybe they could try to grow that, and then pair that with the school system for the cafeterias, and then try to have that market. But sometimes, people want instant gratification. The people who run the cafeterias, they're contracted. They just want to buy from, they just want to pick up the phone, want to order. Even the hotels, right? So even the farmers co-op, they have to come together, which I don't know what maybe they are, and they have to do like the economies of scale, because one, like you mentioned, one bona fide farmer cannot have a contract with the hotel or with the school and say, I'm going to supply you with all the tomatoes you need. But if you have a consortium, or if you have a group of people, right, like the farmers co-op, or you, and then you commit to, you have so much. I think I know they've come a long way, but there's a way and Governor Liu's very interested in that, and even she had an idea that if the government just guarantees to the farmers, whatever you produce, the government will buy it, and let the government be responsible for marketing it, selling it, and let the government take the loss. If nobody buys it and the vegetable rots, then, and then on a regional scale, during FestPac, remember FestPac? They they imported like 50,000 pounds of taro. So why can't we do that? Why can't we get that taro from Rhoda? Why can't we get the tangerines from Koshrai? There's so much potential. Bananas from Pohnpei. We don't we're not aggressive in raising our overall tariff. We're we're as efficient as we can be, and we keep thinking about our bottom line. But we've come a long way in terms of regulation. In terms of regulation, all the boats that come into the marina from Rhoda, and so it's usually like boats sometimes from Saipan to Guam, or Saipan, Rhoda, Guam, or Guam to the other islands. But for most people in Rhoda, this is the lifeline. This is where you have small boaters, car they're registered as cargo haulers in a very small scale because they're not like, this is where they like a couple sacks of rice, couple cases of spam, but propane tanks, like butane, things like that, right? And so when they come to Guam, before they were coming at all hours of the day, then they offload like in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. We don't allow that anymore. When they come in, they have to give a notice of arrival to the harbor master. They can only offload 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I believe Monday through Friday. Yeah, this has been the standard. And then customs has to be on site to inspect. Also, they're looking for accountability also for the passengers, make sure there's no human trafficking. Or port was the only entity on the island that was 100% operational. And credit to the employees, the port employees. There's a motto: "Port strong, no fear." Yeah, yeah, no fear, Fanachu, stand up, right? So, here at the port, we realize our responsibility to the community. Like every time we have a groundbreaking ceremony, ribbon cutting ceremony, the governor always tells every port employee, "Hey, if you guys don't come to work, there's no food on the table. If port employees don't come to work, there's no supplies for the hospital. There's no even for education." Very heavy on work-life balance. So we did a survey, and overwhelming response is the employees, I mean, if if you don't take care of the home front, you're not gonna have a very productive uh, work environment. And so we do surveys. You could see survey says port employee satisfaction all-time high. Um, yeah, yeah, because I mean the backbone of any organization is the employees. And so when we have these celebrations, it's not just, oh, have lunch and go back to work. It's an opportunity to show appreciation, to have fellowship, and then we make sure that, we the two things I've always learned is never mess with someone's time and their money. Yeah. Week we have different divisions do something like a wellness program. Like maybe they organize a walk along seawall, or they bring in they have a lecture on healthy eating, or some kind of therapeutic, just something, get people to come together. Every celebration almost, we have like a lunch celebration, like tomorrow week. Or we even celebrated Filipino Independence Day. So we're very diversified. We're a very diversified workforce, so we celebrate all the different cultural events here. And then, like I said, Port Week, we go all out. When you have 90% of the goods coming into the island, you could just imagine what would have happened if the port did not remain operational throughout the pandemic. And so during lockdown, um, you can imagine that the ships were still coming in. We were still servicing these vessels. Uh, so we had a policy to have all these containers remain at the port. We extended the amount of free days because each consignee and has 5 days to bring the containers out, or they get to start getting charged a demurrage fee, and these demurrage fees add up if they don't get the containers out within 5 days. So we didn't want to have them bring their containers out to like mom and pop store and then run the risk of those containers getting broken into or wherever the place of business is. So we had those containers stockpiled here. Of course, the reefer containers like the commodities, the perishables, those got out immediately like to the Payless and the hotels and things like that because you had quarantine facilities and people need to eat. So I know a lot of the questions you have is on food sustainability and the port's role in creating local agriculture and agriculture and things like that. But more to your question about the what happened during the pandemic, when then as soon as the governor opened up the island, these containers were already here at the port. And so it was just a matter of them coming here, getting their containers. And so everything was it happened like clockwork and there was an ease of getting but imagine if the shippers and the consumers who ordered these goods had to think about, wow, if the port didn't accommodate me with these free days, and I had to cancel my order and then order once the community went back into full blown open, from lockdown, it's going to be difficult to reorder the supplies and everything else. And so that's how we reshaped our thinking here at the port is I know you can't be all things to everyone, but why can't we try? And we've been since 2019 under the Governor Lou and Lieutenant Governor Josh and our board. We've been really reordering our thinking where why can't we be all things to everyone responsibly and methodically and do things like it doesn't cost us money to stockpile these containers here at the port, but if we're going to take a hard line and say, oh, if you have your containers here more than 5 days, we're going to start charging. Well, what would that have meant for the people, their bottom line? And then what would that have meant for the customers? You're going to see a artificial spike in the cost of goods and services. And we don't want to do that. So whatever we can do to not have these artificial spikes, we're very sensitive to that.
We are very
Yeah.
sensitive to that. I'm also learning that as I do research for like these episodes.
Because I'll tell you, we are extremely sensitive to that. And as general manager, there's some politicians who are not sensitive to that, and I get attacked. Like GPA brought in these 12 huge generator components. So when we extended the 3 days during the pandemic, you're talking about millions of dollars, maybe 3 million, 4 million in extending those 3 days, but there's no cost to the port because they're stockpiled on asphalt. So in GPA's case, there was 12 generator components for Okudu, huge
Right.
components. You probably recall. But it wasn't space that we needed. It didn't affect our operational requirements, nothing like that. The vendor, there was problems with transporting those generator components for the Okudu power plant because the bridges had to be uh, retrofitted. There was transportation logistics. DPW had to give additional permitting. Yeah, so on outside the port, there's a whole other operation that had to be resolved that wasn't even foreseen in the planning. So it wasn't the contractor's problem, right? And so we gave him a estimate of what it was going to cost for the delay in storing it here, about $4 million. But in government procurement, if the cause is not caused by the contractor and it's caused by some unforeseen circumstances, then they have a right to ask for a change order and an economic adjustment. GPA or not cheaper, but to reimburse that contractor for that additional to reimburse that contractor for the additional expense. But GPA didn't budget for this. So GPA would take that $4 million and it raised our power rates. Everybody's power rate would have gone up because where are you going to get $4 million?
So we really pay for that.
No, yeah. But in our case, the tariff gives me as general manager flexibility to look at these extenuating circumstances and extend the number of free days that makes sense. So when we extended the number of free days, there was, few in the legislature, I think just one, that was so angry. Oh, that's $4 million for the port. Oh, Rory could have collected that money, but to what end?
Oh, so they want to like kind of get or acquisition that money. Okay.
Get that money because in one hand it's good for the port, which who doesn't need money, especially as government agency like the port. But at what end? That's why I said we want to be all things to everyone. Then the cascading effect and the consequence would be to the community. And so you're going to see that here at Traverse Island, we do everything that we can. Like we help customs with their mandate to inspect the containers for drugs, biosecurities. We do that with the marinas to include the human trafficking deterrence. And so we're growing by leaps and bounds. Well, we're heavily dependent on processed and packaged goods. And what comes in by ship influences not only what we eat and use, but also what we throw away. And this affects our waste systems and our environment. And most recently, we have a board member, Ms. Conchita Taitino. She's a vice chair, and she retired from U.S. Environmental Protection Agency after like 30 years of government service. So her role on the board is really to look at port sustainability, clean ports program. She, together with planning, we worked on a clean ports grant, got a $2.4 million grant to do to look at clean ports. Um, she was involved in I don't know if you're aware, like with the first gentleman, Jeff Cook, they did a a island-wide sustainability study with the zero waste. They took the island-wide zero waste initiative and then they're replicating it here at the port. And they took all the initial data for that, used that to compete for this Clean Port grant, and very competitively we were awarded $2.4 million. And thank God, because of her aggressiveness and her relationship with US EPA, they did something unprecedented that before the final days of the Biden administration, they actually worked to deposit that grant money into the port so so that we didn't lose it. And if you saw the big beautiful bill as it's being coined, any monies that weren't obligated under the Clean Ports grant, you saw what happened, right? They zeroed it out. They also zeroed out tax credits for solar. That's gonna end December 2026 for residential homes. The tax solar credit's gonna end for businesses next year, 2027. Part of the $2.4 million grant, it's going to track like what is our carbon footprint, and then what kind of mitigation efforts have to be put in place to reduce our carbon footprint, and then also resiliency, like a microgrid. What kind of sustainability efforts have to be put in place? What does that look like? The climate change is real. People, some politicians in the states, current crop that's in leadership, they don't want to acknowledge climate change. It is an existential crisis. The sea level rising is real. There's a study that shows that at some point down the road, I mean, it's 50 years from now, we have to raise our wharfs by even 4 inches. Otherwise, the sea level rising is going to overtake the. But you see it in the other islands. In Majuro, you have climate refugees where even parts of their airport runway has been taken over by the ocean. So in Majuro, right, it's an atoll, and then in the middle of the atoll, that's where so they had to go to higher ground because of the sea level rising, and and even other ports have to start thinking about raising their wharfs because of the, and so we're preparing for that. And so those are the those are the threat levels that we're seeing. And we just can't say, oh, we'll just address this 40 years from now. I mean, that's why we're grateful that Miss Conchita's on the board. Conchita Taitano. There's a struggle, right, Tori? Because you have today's needs, tomorrow's needs, and then you next month, next year, and then the future. So if you, but you, yeah, then you think about of course, the environment, right? But then he, I kept talking about the need for like replacing the gantry cranes, then also a microgrid. So microgrid is like you have like a standalone power system that won't necessarily rely on Guam Power Authority. Microgrid could also be like alternate power source, whether it's from the sun, whether it's from the ocean. You know, celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, and there's gonna be a conference, a one-day conference on sustainability around October. Yeah, and how do you marry what we need to do down the road versus the challenges we face today? And I've always said we don't sugarcoat anything, and it's like we're figure skating on thin ice because when you look at the port from the outside in, we have everything to be proud of. Everything. You drive in, right? This is an industrial place, but this area is, it's like family oriented. Sunset, people are jogging, people are walking, um, people are learning how to swim. So we have port police, like police presence, in the afternoon, all times of day. We entered into a contract with Black Construction for 10.5 million for 4 years. So you're gonna see this whole place transformed. They're gonna pave the road down to Family Beach. We're gonna do a bathroom shower facility. We're gonna do solar lighting. Um, we think that this is gonna be the next Tumon Bay, at least in terms of bringing people out here. The seawall, we're chasing a grant to do solar lighting and rest stops.
Mic drop.